Stefanie in 2011. So we exist since then, and I don't know if you know what a hackerspace is. So a hackerspace is similar to a makerspace. So it could be also a space like this that is out of the institution, where people pay or are part as members, and they share tools that they cannot afford themselves. So the idea is also not only to share the tools, but also to actually share the knowledge in a peer-to-peer situation. So they are maker spaces, which are usually more commercial oriented, very well organized, and they are hacker spaces, which are more part of a subculture of making and hacking. So these are also usually more interesting spaces for us because they are self-organized. They have much more social challenges, right? So how to organize the space, how to contribute, how to clean, how to share. And there is many different hacker spaces. I mean, there's a lot of maker spaces also in Barcelona, but the hacker space came mainly from Germany. Like, let's say, it started in Europe, in Germany, and it was expanded obviously to Austria. And in Austria, we have the second biggest in Europe. So it has more than 200 members. It's only 200 square meters. Everyone pays a small membership, and they can just go and they have their own key. But of course, in this community of hackerspaces, I learned most of what I know. I study painting, and I know most of technology knowledge I know is actually from these hackerspace communities. And they are usually, back to the time actually when I started in 2011-12, there were 98% male participants. So we were asking why, and we wanted to change that, and we decided to start our own space where we could have somehow a more safer space to share this kind of knowledge. And I'm very proud to say we are one of the first in the whole world, and now part of a wider network around the planet. So our space and our research project is really grounded in these ideas, and that's why I'm also sharing this with you. This is an illustration from Stefanie, which I think really also was done more than 12 years ago, but it really tries to illustrate our spirit and what we wanted to do. So we wanted to have only female identified people participating in this community. So actually in German, we call it FLINTA. So this is the acronym for women, lesbian, intersex, non-binary, trans, and gender people. And we wanted to create a safe space where we could ask questions or not be afraid to ask questions, not be afraid to break something, and to just really unravel in a way or demystify technology in a fearless way. So we did many different workshops, we still do. And these workshops, they are mainly about emancipation. So it could be that it's about coding, it could be that it's about ceramics or just fixing your own shoes or your own bike. So it's really about how can we share knowledge in a way that we can somehow be sustainable and independent towards technology. So I have just a few pictures from workshops we had recently. We had a collaboration with Hangar in Barcelona, and we invited Wet Lab some years ago, I think 3 years ago, for a workshop and a short residence. So for instance, this is a workshop how to do your own transistors that it can be used, of course, to compute algorithms. And also, of course, workshops about how to do bio-leather, and this was a poster of a feminist hardware festival we had running for a month, also 3 years ago. I mean, recently we do a program with the solar exhibition, so we also found out that most of our members and community, they were artists, female artists that were also struggling for visibility in the art world, so they were very often invited to be part of big group shows and not really having the opportunity to show their own work in a solo stage. So we started 10 years ago a program which is now was awarded with the City of Vienna Prize for just solo exhibitions of female-identified or flinted people. So these are just a few pictures. This was our last space. So as you can see, we also, our understanding of technology is a broader understanding of technology and tools. So everything, I mean, also from an ontological level can be considered a tool. And this is a workshop with ceramics where we were gathering around the table making tokens, something that could have a value that replace, you know, the current capitalistic exchange structure. And we were inserting them in the book. So we also had an artist that was, we try now more and more in this new space to focus into this interface also with our private and public space. We are in the 20th district of Vienna, which is very multicultural, so we try now to have also more projects that somehow facilitate this understanding and sort of like, let's say, communication with the people that are not from the art scene or not from the tech scene. So, yeah, and we have also, we try to index all our collaborators in a website, which is called Female Artist Index Vienna, so where you have like these artists indexed also in the way of their solo page and exhibition, but it's also about that they get to know each other. And because we very often are asked, like, do you know an artist that works with photography, or do you know female artist that does programming? So here they can show their artworks, but also like share their skills. Yeah, so it was within this framework of this environment at Miss Balthazar that me and Stefanie and also another, we had a researcher also, Taki Torosian, where we came up with this project. We applied for a funding, which is a funding, science fund in Austria. Austria, since 10 years, has a big funding for artist-based projects. So if you ever think about moving to Austria, you have to live there though. You can apply for this, it's called PEEK, P-E-E-K. And it's, for us, was an opportunity to do continue our academic career as postdoctors, but also we had Taka has to do her PhD during this financing, this support. So the project was called, the umbrella project was called Feminist Hacking Building Circuits as an Artistic Practice, and we asked ourselves, what is feminist hardware? So why hardware? Because there's no software without hardware, right? So people tend to forget, or sometimes they think that technology is just immaterial, intangible. It happens on the web, on the cloud. It's virtual, right? But indeed, technology is material, and technology exists in the form of many other things. And of course, all those things have agencies, and of course, they also related with other agencies, creating new content. So I was in the other day in a conference where a panelist was encouraging all the audience, saying like, you have to use AI, you should not resist it, because AI is for free. And AI is not for free. It's absolutely not for free. And even ChatGPT knows that, right? So I asked ChatGPT, is AI for free? And of course, we have the illusion that using is for free, but first we cannot modify the source code, we cannot, I mean the AI is anyhow learning through our behavior, so actually we should be paid for our work, we should not pay for the service. But also what we are more concerned in this project are, of course, the material aspects of AI. So on one hand, the energetic costs, right? We need like a lot of energy to train AI systems. So just an example, like this was what ChatGPT said, that let's say moderate to big AI system will consume the energy of a small town just to learn something. Or if we look into, of course, the water resources. So like a small chat with ChatGPT, let's say, I don't know, 5 pages needs 1 bottle of water. So because of the servers, they heat up really high, and we need the water to cool them out. And this water goes into the system, but with the, let's say, with the temperature, it goes back to the atmosphere, right? So it cannot be recovered. We always have to fill in the system again. And then, of course, the aspects of the hardware and the materials, because this hardware is made out of very precious earth elements and minerals that are being mined, usually in conflict areas. And of course, I will also talk a little bit more about that, because that was actually a little bit the insight of this, or the focus of this research, to really use feminist hacking and, of course, interaction diffractive methodologies to really think about the whole commodity chain of hardware, when it starts, when it ends, and how does the cycle goes. So why feminist? Because tech is still very white male dominated, because we need more ethics, accessibility, inclusivity, and of course empowerment. And we believe that we need to create a critical reflection towards those that are disempowered, those that do not have access, those that are less privileged. And of course, we are working, and this is also very important, within the communities of hackerspaces. We only work with open source software. So that means that the software can be not just used by free, but also modified. So you can modify it from scratch, you have access to the source code, and you are encouraged to share it back with the community. Yeah, and of course, it promotes social justice, and it's rooted on caring and repairing. So we believe in feminism in an intersectional way, so which is across many different areas, fields of privilege, race, gender, and sexuality. So, so these are a little bit the cloud around our topic. So we wanted to also bring all these aspects of the commons, and also the urban mining has a solution, for instance, instead of just extracting more minerals from the earth, to actually reuse them. We wanted to really use a repairing methodology, so rather than just do something new, to repair what is old. And of course, in this idea that how can we entangle all these aspects and come up with different projects that are practice-based, that are artwork, so that can be somehow create or contribute to the awareness on others for this topic. Yeah, so of course some of we didn't do this alone. We did along with the bright feminist minds we know and are very well known at the moment. I will not have time now to talk about that, but they all contributed for us to put together a set of rules. It works a little bit like an algorithm of what feminist hardware is. So I will maybe just share this with you. You can take more than one. I have a lot. So for us, feminist hardware is without mining in harmful ways, environmentally friendly, made under fair working conditions, manufactured from wide available materials which are without generating e-waste, with consent, love, and care. So this works a little bit like has the rules, but also it has a manifesto. How can we produce sustainable hardware? So, in a practical way, we looked into normal PCB, so a printed circuit board. It could be the one that is on your phones, on your computer. Everything that is electronics has a base similar to this. We have materials that are conductive, materials that are not conductive, and we have the semiconductive. So the semiconductive are very well known from listening to it in the news, right? There was a recent war about it. And actually there's still now a huge discussion with Taiwan at the moment, which is the biggest producer of semiconductors. So those, we decided we're not going to make semiconductors, we're going to actually perma-computing, it's like a very new concept. We're going to fish them from devices that are already there and not being used anymore. So basically we recycle them. And so if we look into the conductive materials, and it's very interesting because there's much more conductive materials in nature than non-conductive. So most of the materials, they actually can conduct and carry on electricity. So these are one of the most famous or known or used. And in our PCBs, we have mainly gold and of course tin. We use tin to solder components. And gold is used in just very specific points because gold is one of the most rare minerals, so it's very expensive. It's used only when the connections are really important. Because not like copper oxidates after a long time when it's exposed to air, and gold not. So there is a lot of gold and there is a lot of copper and also silver and tin in your old electronics. So they are all part of these conflict minerals, and they look like this when you collect them and separate them from impurities. So this is how they are in a pure way. And they can be transformed in this way, of course, through many different complex processes which are industrial. And yeah, so there's many different options, or like, let's say, alternatives. There is, in Germany, we have this fair water, so it's like they're producing soldering material that is fair trade. There are already a number of European companies that try to make fair trade electronics. And then on the other hand, we also have companies that are doing urban mining. You know what is urban mining? So urban mining is basically, we try to recover all this gold and all these precious minerals from materials that people do not use anymore. I mean, the most hard to do it is from electronics. And the easiest way is, you know, these shops you have that say, we buy your gold. So that's the easiest way, because you give them something that is already almost 100% gold, they just have to melt it. So these companies, like Augusta is a big one, they take this gold, they transform it and they sell it as ecological mineral because it's reused. But of course, to actually be able to collect gold from electronics, it's not really easy. So there's also other ways of mining minerals, which are now called small-scale mining. So it's like you could mine clay from your backyard. So if you do it in a small scale, of course, the impact for the environment is also smaller. And there's this foam. Have you heard about the fair foam? Mm-hmm. So it's a foam that is made, I mean, not everything that is inside is fair trade. That's impossible, basically. But they try to do their best. But the very interesting approach is that the foam is, they guarantee that it can be used, sustained for more than 10 years. So they will update the software. So this is the first. And also in terms of hardware, you can buy and replace PCs and do it yourself. Mm-hmm. So there's, of course, you have to learn how to do it, and that takes time. Yeah, so if we look into all this commodity chain, right, these minerals, they are being mined mainly in the global south, the so-called global south. So from Indonesia to China to all Central and South America to Africa. And then they are transformed in big manufacturers, usually in Asia, and then they are sold in the so-called global north and consumed by us. Mm-hmm. And then they go back again to the global south as e-waste, right? Has materials that are not used anymore because there are only a few of these companies that can actually recover these metals. And the process is, of course, not very easy, so one needs really to use a poison combination of chemicals in order to be able to extract. And if you use these chemicals, which are also very aggressive, then you also have to dispose them. And the easiest way to dispose them is again in the water, in the rivers, in the sea. So it's a tricky aspect that is being now discussed. So if we look into non-conductive materials, which are very difficult to find, we somehow selected kaolin as one of them. Kaolin is the, let's say, the essence material used in porcelain. So it's what makes the porcelain white. It's not only used in porcelain, it's used in many other industries, actually also in paint, in plastics, rubber, paper. It's actually what makes paper look white. But it's also a mineral that is mined all around, in let's say, precarious areas of the planet. So our diffractive, and here I just wanted to make the last comment with the connection of this topic of this conference, which was INTRA-ACCIÓN, and how we diffractively look to each of the agents that we used in our project. And this is an example of the kaolin. So we look at it like following a methodology that was used by Eina in her book. I don't know if you heard about it, The Mushroom at the End of the World, where she looks into the agency of many different agencies and entanglements of agencies and diffractive ways of understanding their affections in the world of the mushroom, this specific mushroom. We did the same exercise with kaolin and all the other materials that are so important in our project. So just an example with kaolin, right? We look at it, of course, from the ecological aspect and the damage of lands, of the pollution of waters, but also to all this history and colonialism from the point of view of indigenous communities that were using kaolin for other purpose, but also how, the colonizers took the kaolin to make something so precious as porcelain that it was somehow had a totally different connotation in our Western society. But also looking at it from the other perspective and thinking about porcelain has something that an object of porcelain is also rooted in caring and the sharing tradition. So basically what Eina calls gift economies, right? So, I mean, of course, we're talking now from the point where we situate ourselves. So from Central Europe or South Europe, that porcelain was always so valuable. It's still today. We offer something special in porcelain, or it's intended to celebrate a moment. We don't use porcelain anymore in our everyday life. And I think in the last 2 generations, for instance, there used to be a cabinet where the porcelain was exhibited, right? Even if across many different, let's say, levels of privilege, this was something that was honored and appreciated. So just to mention a few, and this is a mine site in Europe, in the UK, that is not being used since many years. So it was one of the biggest kaolin mines we had in Europe. And let's say at a certain point, the mining company decided to not invest anymore, because if there are not enough purity in the mineral, it's not profitable for the company to continue, right? And of course, when the companies leave the land, they leave them the way it is. So it stays like this. And it will not regenerate by itself, right? With kaolin, it's very interesting because in order to mine kaolin, one needs to use a very big machine that is basically trying to collect all these minerals around, like clay, basically. And because the kaolin particles are so thin, and in order to avoid that they get lost in the atmosphere, they have to use a lot of water to settle them down. And then this water is obviously then polluted, cannot be reused anymore because it's already mixed with all these very bad elements of clay, which in particular kaolin. So, and of course, they need more water, so they are actually using the resources of the local communities. So this is a case in Portugal. There was also not such a big mine, but it was active for a long time. And it was the first time that in a Portuguese political situation, a community really came to the streets and they started the war. It was considered a war. So they were actually armed against this company because all their waters got polluted. They could not even use the water for agricultural purpose and for growing animals and so forth. So they managed to get rid of this company, but after some years ago they opened up a mine like 50 kilometers away from it. So if we look into, of course, these precious metals, I mean, we have a few in Europe too, but they cannot be compared from the ones that exist in the global, so-called global south. So this is one of the biggest ore mines in Indonesia. And I will not talk too much about it, but I just, of course, want to emphasize not just a disaster for the environment, but of course to all these indigenous communities that had to leave their land. Also to think about the labor conditions, the very, very precarious labor conditions of the communities that are, in the end, they lose their land and they are forced to work to these big companies. And the conditions are precarious not only for health, but also in terms of payment and in terms of return. And I have here just an example that 1 metric ton of ore, which is gold and copper, requires 1 metric cubic of water. But 1 metric ton of ore, it's equivalent to 10 grams of gold, right? So it's like, not everything that is collected can be actually used. A lot of it is considered waste and is given back to the land with no concerns at all. So all this, if we think about, extractivism is really a form of colonialism. And I would say it's one of the most profitable business in the world. And these companies, they are never accountable in any part of the commodity chain for their the real cost. So, they usually acquisition the land in a very, let's say, with a low level price, because the communities need them, they can employ them in a very, let's say, precarious way, which is, many authors call it like modern slavery, right? It's the only job they have. They use the water, the resources, the natural resources. They never have to pay back for them because when they, for instance, in this copper mine in Chile, and there's also like a very big. So these mines, they all need like huge amount of water. They consume really huge amount of water. There's the biggest one in Chile is actually a lithium mine, and the lithium mine needs even more water. And uses also a lot of liquids that are chemicals to be able to separate the lithium from the other minerals. So they usually, this process of separation happens on next to it. You see that kind of, it looks like big baths, right? Like big lakes. So all these chemicals are exposed to the atmosphere, they go to the environment, and they also generate another level of pollution. So these materials, they are then processed, they are industrialized, manufactured, and I try to go a bit fast. And then, of course, consumed in the global north, creating another kind of poverty and disempowerment. I just brought this picture as an example, because Silicon Valley in San Francisco, as you know, is where all these big companies are now. And of course, they're also generating a lot of employment, but they mainly brought unemployment, and they mainly brought poverty for this community. So a lot of people, because it became so high, the prices became really high, so they could not afford their homes anymore. And at the moment, it's one of the cities in the US that has more homeless people. So there's not even available shelters. People really live on the streets in tents, although they are employed. So, and most of them, they are employed for this tech business. And if we think about, in particular, Amazon, which is known as one of the biggest exploiters/employers in the US, which pay very precarious to the workers and also uses AI to monetize them and also to survive them and to try to make them more efficient, to work more efficient. Yeah, and then of course, the other side, when this garage comes, again, and this is a picture from Ghana, which are, I would say it also exists, of course, in Indonesia, and in Ghana we had some collaborative partners that were working with us, researchers, and they were sending us some images, and we had like bigger discussions on the topic of e-waste in Ghana. So these materials, they are acquired, but of course there's no way to separate them, there's no way to dispose them properly, and they end up like this, polluting the lands and the rivers. Yeah, so how to avoid mining, extraction, contamination, conflict, and exploitation, right? It's a big question. And of course, as artists, we cannot solve the problems of the world, but we can have, we can embody an attitude of working in a sentient way, with low impact, with non-toxic materials, which are fairly traded, recycled, or urban mined materials and means of production. So we thought, how do we do this urban mining gold if we do not own such a company, right? How can we actually urban mine gold? And of course, there's many different tutorials on YouTube how to do it yourself using a microwave. Please don't try. You also need a lot of liquids, like a lot of chemicals, so it's really not good to do it. And we thought, like, okay, how can we just use the gold that it's already in the world to make circuits? So we look into porcelain, actually, and this gold that is applied in the porcelain. So this gold is applied with a process called lustering, so it's a third fire on porcelain. And it uses, let's say, like a chemical composition, which is actually a paint of made of very thin particles of gold, which is mixed with a solvent. And then we paint it. It's like a very difficult process to do, actually, because the paint immediately, if it flows on the wrong direction, and we clean it, it will stay there forever. So it's something that we really need to apply a lot of love and patience to do. And most of this porcelain, where this gold was applied, it's not used anymore. One of the reasons is because our dishwashers somehow are not gold compatible. After a few washes, they come out. So it's not worth it to use it anymore because of the high temperatures and the aggressive detergents we use. So it's usually either safe for special occasions or it ends up like in flea markets. So that's where we bought all this porcelain. So we bought some porcelain and we tried to get some sets that were like more local, and we measured it with a multimeter and everything was conductive, and then we were thinking about solutions, how to use it in a circuit. So we modified, these are just some tests, but the idea was to just modify the porcelain by adding gold using the same technique, or just erasing it with a very thin tool, always acknowledging this agency of the porcelain and adding sensors to it. So we basically had to apply the gold and do this third fire to be able to use it. And of course, some of these, the middle one was actually, it belonged to my family. It was in my family for 100 years, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be very careful that nothing happens. So, yeah, and we did an electronic circuit, which is actually a tablecloth, and it was hand embroidered with conductive thread. This was our first, we have now 2 versions of this project. So what we did is we hooked up like controllers, they are sound triggers, and we made different buttons that are activated with the porcelain. So the main button is whenever we lift and try to pretend we are drinking coffee, there's a light sensor that is exposed and the sound is triggered. So it works a little bit like, it's a table, I don't like to look at it, has a stationary artwork that is exhibited always in the same way, but it's more like a kind of a platform, or let's say an interactive tool for people to play around and have a conversation around this table. So you can just bring your sounds, and easily, it's this microcontroller from Adafruit. It's just a plug and play, so you just have to drag the files from your computer there and call them something that the system will know, and it will play. So this is just an example. It was just like we were doing the prototype. So all these instructions and also all the reference of the project is in a tutorial online you can download and hopefully do your own tablecloth yourself. So with all the measurements and instructions and so on. And there's just the detail, and we use it in different formats for performances. This was in Austria, close to Salzburg. A performance was called Salon of Open Secrets. We did this one, was in Portugal in the Ceramic Biennale. So all these sounds we used, they were mainly about colonialism, coffee, because coffee and ceramics, as you can see, they are both colonized products, right? So we wanted to create a feminist discourse around these materials. Yeah, and then we thought, okay, now we just need to collect this knowledge and do our own ceramic boards. And we started with porcelain, so these are just examples. We tried how can we do these ceramic boards, and then we came up with this hexagonal shape because we thought we can connect them. And we bought and applied the same gold when we had a kind of functional circuit. But then in the end we realized, okay, porcelain first. It's also a very difficult material. It really has another agency. It's so difficult to control. You touch it once, it will stay there forever. You can never get rid of this touch. And we thought, okay, this is going to be difficult. And second, it's a very hard clay, so you need higher temperatures in a kiln. So you need a first fire of around 980, and then a second fire, 1250, and then a third fire of gold, which is around 800 degrees. And we thought, okay, we cannot do environmentally friendly boards that need so much energy. We have to find a solution where we do need it in a more sustainable way. So we met this amazing person. His name is Heinz Lachinga, and he's a prehistoric ceramist based in the south of, let's say, 100 kilometers south of Vienna, where he has his own atelier, and he's an expert on very ancient techniques of making clay and firing clay before the advent of electricity, so before electrical kilns. And we did a 2-day workshop with him where we went through his backyard to the forest, and we were just with a bit of water in one hand. We're just collecting some soil, and he was asking, do you think this is clay? And I said, I don't know. And then through our haptic senses, we were getting after a few hours of walking, now we could already understand and distinguish what was clay from what is not clay. So, of course, everything eventually can be clay, but there are better quality soil with more argil properties. So we collect some in the woods, we took it to his backyard, we all made little cups around the fire, and then we let it dry. This is also very important. And it goes straight into the fire. It's important that it's a wood fire. It's important that we cover it, that it really goes as high as possible. He believes he can achieve around 700 degrees, although we are not really sure because we cannot I mean, eventually we could measure it, but we didn't. So everything is very about tacit knowledge, about haptics and experience. And then in the end, when it glows, when we see it's glowing inside, means it's ready. So we transfer it to cold water, and if it doesn't break, it's done. It was a successful experience. Some of them, of course, break. So I really had this idea, this question with him, because I thought there's no way this is going to be waterproof, because in ceramics we learned that we need really high temperatures, that it becomes waterproof. But indeed we all drank a little bit of wine, because this area of the country is known for the wine. So we were all toasting and tasting a little bit of wine, and indeed it is waterproof. It's amazing. I was really surprised. So I also did an experiment with the gold, and I realized, okay, this is perfect, because with the same fire, the same wood, we can do everything. We can have the circuiting print, and we can have the ceramic hard. Yeah, so we had another problem later when we came back to the city, because of course we do not have a land to make a fire. So in his backyard is very nice, but you know, the city has its own rules, in particular Vienna. The Austrians, they are very sure and proud of their rules. And of course I cannot just go into the garden and open up a fire. So we were looking also into this aspect, how can we hack the city and the infrastructure of the city. So in Vienna, close to the river, there's these barbecue areas. They are for free. And you have to book them in advance in the system. It's a system online. It's really very difficult to find a spot in summer. You have to be there on the 1st of January. Really. It costs €5 and they bring you the wood, so it's a very nice service from the city. And it was a very socialist project, that it's still there and very appreciated by the citizens. So the first time we did that, we went there in winter, which it was possible to find an appointment, of course, in summer is more difficult. And this was another project. We were just testing how can we use this interface from the city to actually fire the ceramics. So in winter it's complicated because the Danube, sometimes the temperatures are so low that it freezes. So there's no water in the island. So if you need to go to the toilet, you are really in the middle of the nature. So we had to use the water that was still accessible from the river. So everything was really quite with no access to other infrastructures except this place where we could do the fire. But they brought us the wood. This was also very nice. With some experiments. We did another project which was called Who Has Land to Make a Fire, with another sculpture. Actually it was a fountain. So that fountain on the left made of ceramic that was collected in the countryside and then fired there. Yeah, and also I went there with my students in spring, and we also did our different boards in the fire. So it goes like this. It's more or less a successful piece. So great, and these are some of the boards. Of course, it's not an easy process, because it really depends where you take the clay. It depends how sensitive are you to work with it. So the idea is like, of course, you have to collect it, you add water and so on. And also, of course, the fire, nobody can really control this fire as you can control the kiln fire, right, which is electrical. So it depends on the wood you use even. So it really, I have been doing workshops in many other places, and I always come across new challenges. And of course, this brings frustration too. This was an exhibition we had at the Ars Electronica Festival this year. We were nominated for the prize, Starts Prize. Mm-hmm. And online we have in our feministhacking.org website, we have a clay PCB section with the concept, the tutorial, and also documentation from the workshops. So everything is accessible, and you have a QR code in the back of the postcard where you can also download these instructions. So you have even the instructions for making the clay and the instructions for the electronics. So I just go now really quickly through all the steps. So what is this board about, right? This board is not just doing a function, performing one function, but it's actually a board that can be programmed with many different functions. So like an Arduino, so that's why we call it ArduinA in that sense. So we have, it has the same chip, it's a microcontroller chip. So that's the most important part of the electronics. And we decided that because in our hackerspace we had a lot of these Arduinos around, and some of them, they were not working anymore, but the chips were working. So we thought, okay, let's do something where we can recycle. Also because now these Arduinos with this chip format in particular, they are being discontinued in the market. So they are being replaced by smaller chips and cheaper boards, and we try now to collect them and reuse them for this purpose. So this is the most difficult part. We urban mined within our friends and our garbage to use it, and it's basically, of course, you can also buy it new if you want to do so. It costs around €5. And then we look, okay, how can we do this? So this Arduino, what it does is it reads voltage and gives voltage back in a very simple way. So you have a lot of pins that can be inputs or outputs, and this voltage from 0 to 5 can be modulated in many different ways and frequencies. So basically we can have different sensors, like a push button has an input, an LED has an output, and we have an interface in the middle that we can connect to our computer and program. And say every time I click the button, blink 10 times, right? So of course we can expand it to many different complex projects. We can almost do everything with it, but it's a very small, let's say, simple microcontroller. It has no memory, it's not like a computer, okay? So if you want to use sound or video, you always need to have extra hardware. So this board, what it does is it has several inputs and outputs, which are already pre-programmed, but you can modify if you want. So we wanted to do it, a circuit board, only with one layer, because obviously it's the only way to go with ceramics. And we said, okay, we're going to have an analog sensor, we're going to have a capacitor sensor, it works like an antenna. And we have a button, and then we have, has an output, we can have LEDs, speakers, piezos, and we have, of course, to power this, we need electricity. This problem, we tried to do mud batteries, but so far they were not very stable in powering our board. We use, at the moment, for me, because I was traveling, the easiest way was to have just a reused, let's say, rechargeable battery. So lithium again. But if I'm at home, I have an AC/DC transformer, which I can just connect to the plug. And gives me the voltage I need. So this chip needs 5 volts to work. I can also use a motor, a DC motor, up to 12 volts. And then I need more extra power. So we come up with the circuit, we test it, and then we 3D printed. So these instructions are also online. We 3D printed like this stamp. The idea is like to press it against the clay so that we have like the circuit imprinted, but then we need to basically paint it, right? So we found out a company that is selling urban mined silver. It's made with the leftovers of jewelry makers, because jewelry makers, when they work on silver, they have this leather piece where they collect the dust of the silver, and this comes in very, very fine particles. So if you use the right solvent, you can make a paint out of it. So this is what we use for painting the circuit. So not gold, but silver. What happens with the silver, when it goes on the fire, it becomes white because of this oxidation process. But if you polish it again, it's still silver, and it's still conductive. So in this tutorial, you will find everything, all the instructions, and here what we're going to do is the following. We have different kinds of clay. We have some of these clay that needs to be transformed into a powder that Joe kindly collected illegally for us. And she can share about it later. Yeah. And then we have also industrial clay because we didn't manage to collect enough. So the idea is, usually in Austria, when I collect this clay, it really looks like soil. So I have to use an object like this to separate the little stones, the little animals that come with it, and to just, in order to just obtain like a very fine powder, which is usually like this. And then we add water to this powder, and of course we work it like dough, it's like bread, and we make a little ball, and that's why we have here the system. So we just roll it like dough, and we can take, of course you can also do another object, but I brought this tile cutter, is called, where we can just like cut the piece of the base of this PCB, and then afterwards we print the circuit, we paint it by hand, because if we stencil it, we'll have a lot of waste of silver. So this is the most ecological part. So also you need to take some time to paint it right. So today you will do until this phase, and then you are happy or like invited to fire your own clay when it's dry. Usually it takes 1-2 days. You can do it in a barbecue. Better if it's like a wood fire barbecue. So you can also come together, do it together, or maybe find a relative and a friend that owns some land and is willing to share the backyard. So there's also instructions and tips how to make the fire, how to cover it. Usually it takes 20 minutes. They need 20 minutes to achieve this temperature. Yeah, and then there's, of course, the full tutorial with all how to transform this chip in something that can be programmable. So there's also, for the Arduino, there's a huge community online, like thousands of people are contributing, and or let's say thousands of different communities with millions of people contributing. And you will find a lot of troubleshooting information if you find any problem. And then here also like an infographic with how all the pins work, the capacitive sensor, the analog. And you basically just need the chip, a transistor, and a couple of resistors and a capacitor. So it's not a lot. Also instructions how to solder each of the parts. So I usually use a hot soldering iron, like hot air, but you can also do it with a soldering iron. And always be conscious that, of course, it's really about failing a lot and trying it. So probably the first board is not great, but the second one is going to be better. So we did a workshop exactly last year at Angar, where we had 2 days, and we really did the whole steps. It was really challenging. It was 10 hours a day. However, actually not all steps, because I sent the clay from Austria by post. Because we didn't manage to organize in time. And we illegally fired it at Angar. So we were praying that nobody calls the police, but we managed. And then we had time to solder everything and test the board. And this was another workshop I did at PIV camp in Slovenia this summer, where I found some clay there, but it was not great. I had some accidents, so it was cracking a lot. But we had some successful pieces, but it was really challenging again because the clay was not the same, and I had to try more, less water, and so on. So this was, but in the end we had some functional pieces. So I mean, the way they are, they basically beep, but you can program it to do whatever you want. This is just a speculative design approach to hardware making, and I do at the moment also different, try to embody it in different parts or in different making sensors out of ceramics, also in my own practice, and try to also expand a little bit this technology to other contexts. So the real world challenges are in another scale. There are challenges that we cannot answer directly, but we hope we can contribute in a positive way to the idea of a sustainable, ethical, feminist hardware. Yeah, and that's it for my presentation. So we start with the hands-on already a little bit.